Sadly, the end of summer is drawing near. While I love the fall, the colors, and the cooler temperatures, this does mean that our growing season is coming to an end eventually. There are some plants that love to continue to grow into the fall, but once the first heavy frost happens, most of our annual vegetable plants are finished growing and will start to die off. As plant life starts to slow down and our work in the garden does not end, there is still much to do to prepare for next season. What's the expression? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Well, that's exactly true in gardening if you take the time to prepare your beds for spring. At the time of the first heavy frost, or when your annual plants turn brown, it's time to remove them out of the garden. Take as much of the plants as you can, pulling them up by the roots. Burn or throw away any plants that appear diseased, and then you can compost any of the other remaining plants. Fall is the best time to start a compost if you do not have one already. You'll have lots of material from your garden, and you can mix in fallen leaves. Run your lawnmower over the fallen leaves to mulch them, catching them in the mulch bag attachment. Then layer the leaf mulch in your compost along with newspaper and pulled plant material. If there are a lot of fallen leaves, you won't want to use all of them in the compost because it's just too much, but this will cut down on the amount of leaves you need to bag and send to recycle. Remove stakes, cages, and trellises as well as any supports that aren't permanent structures in your garden. Spray them and wipe them down with a mixture of 2 parts water and 1 part bleach. This kills any diseases so they won't spread to next year's crops. Make sure they're dry before you store them, and take some time to organize how they're stored so that in the spring you can access them easily. Soil preparation is the next task to ensure when spring arrives your beds are ready for planting. Add a layer of compost to your soil to help replace the nutrients that your crops used and improve the texture of your soil. Adding it in the fall will give the nutrients a chance to break down into the soil. If you're using manure, make sure it's appropriate for edible gardens. Adding manure in the fall gives it a chance to break down over the winter so it won't burn your seedlings in the spring. Now is also a good time to add amendments to your soil. You can reference back to our series on soil to determine what amendments your soil may need to be the right mixture for planting your vegetables in the spring. Till the soil to mix in any amendments, compost or manure, and to remove old roots, rocks, and weeds. Remember I talked about mulching your leaves for compost? Well, after you've added some to compost, you can use the balance to add this mulch over the garden beds to protect them from the winter elements. Mulch prevents erosion and insulates the soil from the cold. Worms will come closer to the surface to help break down your compost, and the mulch will prevent weed seeds from sprouting in the spring. If you're worried that the leaf mulch may blow away, just water it so it stays in place. Avoid adding pine needles to the mulch mixture as these can make soil more acidic. In the spring, you will rake off the heavy leaves that haven't broken down, as this layer of mulch is too suffocating for your new seedlings. Removing them also allows the soil to warm up. After you've finished the physical prep work, now is the best time to pull out that garden journal and take some notes. What worked well? What didn't? Are there crops you want to rotate? What will your plan for your gardens look like for next season? You're not going to remember these details when spring rolls around, so it's best to take notes at this time. And pull out your phone to take pictures to help you put next season's plan in place. For me, I will likely move my zucchini plants to a regular garden bed and not plant them in a raised bed next year. This makes room for me to plant peas in my raised beds. I'll also keep only 2 tomato plants in my raised beds and put the balance in the other garden I had to transfer them to this year. I think I'll plant them with beans. I may have to make a new bed for them if I want as many plants as I had this season. These are just some of my thoughts as I work through what I've learned from this season in preparation for next season. Another consideration for preparing your garden beds for spring is planting a cover crop. These are crops that you sow as seed at the end of the season with no intention of harvesting them. You leave them in the garden during the winter and then in the spring. You turn them under into the soil. The purpose of a cover crop is they act like a mulch to help prevent erosion and minimize weeds. Cover crops add nutrients to the soil and improve the soil's texture. Crops that grow quickly between the last harvest and the first frost are alfalfa, oats, and barley. Before you plant your garden in the spring, you'll need to cut down your cover crop and turn it under. I've talked a lot about what to do with the garden bed as it pertains to annual plants, but what about your perennial plants? Dividing old perennials will help rejuvenate well-established perennials and keep them from getting overgrown or producing underdeveloped crops. This only needs to happen every 3 to 7 years, so if this was your first season, you don't need to worry about it right now. Fall is the best time to divide perennials. To do this, drive a sharp spade through the center and cleanly remove half of it. You can plant this half in another spot in your garden, or you can give it away to another gardener. Once that half is removed, fill in the hole with compost so the remaining roots aren't exposed and they have plenty of nutrients to help them recover from the shock of being divided. Another task to undertake is to cut back dying greens on your perennials. It's important not to cut the greens off these plants until they're thoroughly brown or until you've had the first hard frost of the season. Even leaves that are starting to turn brown can still collect sunlight to make next season's plants stronger. Perennials are hardy plants usually, but they still need some tender loving care. In our climate, the best protection is mulch. Mulch will help regulate the temperature change so the perennials don't freeze and thaw repeatedly. The cold keeps the perennials dormant, but lots of temperature fluctuation can lead to them sending up growth too early and getting damaged by a hard frost. When using leaves as mulch, chop them up with the lawnmower so the perennials aren't restricted by the heavy layer of leaves in the spring. Also, in the spring, make sure that you remove the mulch from the crown of the plant before it starts putting on growth. Otherwise, the plants could become misshapen. So now you've taken care of putting your garden and plants to bed or hibernation for the winter. As you're tidying up and starting to put your tools away, now is the perfect time to clean and prep your garden tools for next season. There are essentially 7 areas of care to consider. First, remove the dirt from the tools. You can use the hose to do so and follow up with a bristled brush for anything that doesn't dislodge from the hose water, as well as steel wool to take away the fine dirt remaining. Check your shovels, spades, rakes, and pruners for this dirt. Next, you'll want to disinfect your tools by spraying them with rubbing alcohol to disinfect them. This simple step prevents spread of disease from one plant to another and from one season to the next. You can remove rust from your tools with a Naval Jelly product. It contains phosphoric acid that will convert the rust into a black substance you can scrub away. You can find Naval Jelly at garden supply stores or online. Sharpen the blades of your tools, including your spades. To do so, use a file designed for garden tools. Hold the file at an angle over the edge of the blade and push the file in one direction away from the blade to recreate the angle of the original beveled edge. This needs to be repeated many times to achieve a sharp and angled edge. Pruners are often designed to come apart to make filing easier, so keep that in mind and check to see if that's true for your pruners. Use a lubricant like WD-40 to oil the moving parts of your tools. If the wooden handles of your garden tools are drying out and cracking, clean them and sand the rough areas or splinters. Then apply linseed oil to replenish the wood to prevent cracking. Finally, some of the tools may require repair. If it's a simple fix like tightening screws, then that's easy enough. If it looks like it's beyond repair or too costly, fall is a good time to shop and replace garden tools as they're often on sale. This wraps up the final chores for the end of the season. It's been a reasonably good growing season this year despite the heat. I'm already starting to plan in my head what I want to do for next season. We have a long winter ahead of us, but that gives us plenty of time to peruse gardening books for more ideas and seed catalogs to determine what you want to plant in your gardens for next year. Maybe you'll venture into some new vegetables you haven't tried yet. I'm thinking about squash, perhaps pumpkin, and I'd like to focus more energy on root vegetables next season. May 2-4 weekend is our target weekend to plant our gardens, but lots of seeds can be started indoors 6 to 8 weeks before the last frost. Think about the time between the first frost in the fall to the last frost in spring, and use that time to plan, order seeds, plant them indoors so they're ready to go when the last frost is done. Enjoy this season's harvest, everyone, and good luck with your fall preparations. It's been a pleasure sharing the information I've learned through resources, online, books from the library, through my Gale course I've taken online at the library, from local gardening experts who've shared their tips and tricks, and our very special guest, Max Valier of Green Wheel Farms. Until next season, happy gardening, everyone. Stay safe and stay well.